February 14th, which is the day after. And then I went back to this guy because he was wearing a blue hoodie. Who the heck is that? Looking shady and suspicious. Fudge. This is from the day after when they found the girls. Crews were being sent out with 10 to 12 people to cover 20 to 25 square miles. And that's Tobe Lesby said that. Hundreds of searchers. For example, this lady is from Logansport. Her friend saw her post and she wanted to beat up to go search for him. She was coming from Lafayette. Got to the fire station at 11 and they got sent out to look in the fields. She said she didn't understand why they weren't looking where the girls had been last seen. They had been instructed to stay away from the area where the girls had last been seen because search dogs were out. Authorities told volunteers they didn't want the chance of contaminating the scene. But search dogs? Like, what? And we know that Tobe Lesenby has said that one of his biggest regrets was calling off the search dogs. I just said regrets, not regrets. That's funny. But anyways, this article makes it sound like the search dogs were already there. So Richard Allen said he reported his information to a conservation officer. And so I was like, what is a conservation officer anyways? And so let's watch this video on that.
Addition, protecting Indiana's natural resources. The first fish and game laws introduced in Indiana in 1849. 1911 saw the creation of 37 game wardens in Indiana. The wardens were paid $75 per month, and within their first month were averaging 55 arrests each, a national record. In 1939, game wardens officially became Indiana conservation officers, and 2 years later were given full police power. Today, there are 214 Indiana conservation officers enforcing federal, state, and local laws and are the thin green line protecting Indiana's natural resources. The Division of Law Enforcement works with all divisions of the Department of Natural Resources, enforcing their laws and regulations and working together as part of the DNR family. ICOs are specifically charged with enforcing the laws of the DNR and spend much of their time working with the Division of Fish and Wildlife, checking fishing license, working with hunters and trappers, and protecting non-game and endangered wildlife are daily responsibilities for Indiana conservation officers and are primary draws for many recruits. In addition to wildlife enforcement, Indiana conservation officers work with the Division of State Parks and Reservoirs to enforce boating regulations and provide a law enforcement presence in the parks to ensure a safe and fun time for all visitors. Conservation officers also work with the Division of Forestry to inspect active logging operations and to investigate cases of timber theft on public and private land. Historical resources also fall under the supervision of the DNR within the Division of Historic Preservation and Archaeology and are likewise protected by Indiana conservation officers. Protecting Indiana's water resources with the Division of Water also falls under the responsibilities of Indiana conservation officers, whether that is checking for permits for construction in a floodplain or investigating the contamination of groundwater, checking licenses, permits, and operations of water well drillers. Enforcing the rules of the road for off-road vehicles and snowmobiles also falls under the wide-ranging duties of an Indiana conservation officer. Along with law enforcement, education and working with the public is a large portion of the work of an Indiana conservation officer. Whether it's a hunter education course, boater education, or life jacket promotion, snowmobile or ATV training, or just being available for the public at events like the Indiana State Fair or the Hoosier Outdoor Experience, Indiana conservation officers are called to serve and work with the public often. In addition to enforcing the rules and regulations of the many divisions of the DNR, Indiana conservation officers also perform special duties and services, including swift water rescue, canine units, and search and rescue, cave rescue, and scuba operations. Finally, Indiana conservation officers are sworn law enforcement officers with full police powers. They work with federal, state, and local agencies to enforce Indiana state laws and the regulations of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. The duties of an Indiana conservation officer are wide-ranging. They protect our natural and historical resources, work with the public, and enforce the laws of the Department of Natural Resources. The men and women of the Division of Law Enforcement are proud to carry on the tradition of the thin green line.
This is from October 3rd, 2017, and it is an article talking about Clark County, Indiana, wave. Not many of us can say we have jobs that depend solely on our nose. The dogs and their nose. It allows us to be more proactive in enforcement, Indiana Department of Natural Resources Conservation Officer Jeff Milner said. For conservation canines, like Fury, their nose is everything. Tracking people, whether it be a poacher or someone who fled from Indiana State Police or any other police agency, Milner said. For dogs who love to work like Fury, work and play blend into each other. His reward is to play with his master, or the alpha dog, which would be me, Milner says. He works for hours just so he gets to play. Area searches, evidence retrieval, and out-of-season ginseng enforcement are some of the things Fury and the team are assigned to do. Their team canines were also one of the first to fetch answers during the Martinsville school shooting. It was one of our canines that located a gun that was used in that school shooting, Milner said. Their nose may possibly be the most requested nose in the state. From Ohio, sorry, from Ohio River to Lake Michigan, FBI requests our dogs to find firearms, Milner said. These heavy tasks for the dogs are no walk in the park. However, Fury is probably safe to assume that he's happy about his employment and, more importantly, his home. He ended up at an animal shelter twice, Milner said. He was adopted, and then a few months later, he was returned. That's when we located him and gave him a job. Milner probably also feels the same way, grateful for the companionship. As conservation officers, we work alone most of the time, Milner said. If you're one of the canine handlers, you always have a set of eyes and ears with you. In DNR canine teams is made up of 12 dogs. Among 12, 6 are from shelters, which is kick-ass right there. Honestly, I love dogs personally, and especially ones that are trained to do cool stuff.
Kristen Eskow shows us some of the unique work these dogs do. It's a good boy.
For these dogs, playtime is sometimes paired with practice. In this scenario, Canine Delta is telling her handler she's found a gun in the grass.
It'd take 10, 15, 20 people to search that whole area, but as a canine, they smell the human scent.
Conservation Officer Matt Tholen and his canine partner Drake work for the Indiana Department of Natural Resources.
It's a different ballgame. You've always got your partner with you.
Tholen says a lot of their work involves searching for people. In state parks, that includes lost hikers and hunters.
Throughout the hunting season, we get called more often than you would say boating season during the summers.
But the canine unit also helps local agencies in searches for missing people on both public and private land. And the dogs are trained to detect certain criminal activity as well and find evidence. The DNR says canines like Drake have been tied to more than 2,300 arrests statewide since the program launched 25 years ago.
Right? That's interesting. I think it is, at least. Because in particular, those black labs, during the search, and I'll find a photo and put it in here, there was a black lab dog, which we're told was not part of the search and rescue. And why did Tobleton call in help from out of town? Like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Let alone when he called him off. That also doesn't make any sense. So if they didn't find the murder weapon with the body, then there's no reason that they should have called it off or anything of the sort. It doesn't make sense. Did they find the weapon or they didn't? Because if they didn't, they have resources like in Indiana to help them find that. So it makes zero sense that they wouldn't have called out for that. Okay, that's pretty much it.
We are here for the IDHS water cadaver search class.
Today we're out working with canines on water with the handlers to give not only canines but also the handlers experience.
That entails getting the dogs to understand that people can be missing in the water and teaching the dogs how to indicate while on a boat because they can't really control where they're going on the boat.
Today gives them an opportunity to work in a controlled environment and get used to working on the water, get used to the boat, and get used to the odor that's provided when there's an incident.
For Indiana Department of Homeland Security to provide this training for us is amazing. My dog is certified in land human remains, and I wanted to progress him and do water.
Depending on the experience level of the dog, some puppies will start out with just boat rides. More experienced dogs will be learning to
locate and hone in on the strongest source smell of human remains and water under the boat.
When you're trying to find odor, especially in the water, what we generally tend to do, if it's moving water, we'll go upstream and work down the middle of the stream until we catch odor with the dog. You can see that by the body language of the dog. They may have a head turn, they may start barking, they might whine. There's some different things that gives us an indication that they've found something in the water.
So on land, it's very easy for the dog to walk over and identify, here's the spot.
Perfect! Who's a good girl?
When working on water, it's all very consistent. You have a flat surface the whole way.
The difference between land and water, if you're doing land human remains, the dog can literally get on top of the source, and you can sometimes see it, sometimes not if it's buried, but the dog knows he's right on top of the source and he's going to give you a good strong alert. Where if you're in the water, there's a lot of current, there's a lot of wind going on, and you're not necessarily going to be right on top of the source. So the handler has to do a lot of reading of the dog, and you have to know the water that you're working in, the depth of the water, the temperature of the water, the wind current, the water current, to kind of give divers an idea of where to start diving to locate the missing person.
So in teaching the dog that their body movements has power as to which way the boat's moving, it creates a dog that will help show us and narrow down a search area for a drowning victim.
This gives an opportunity for different teams to get a wide experience on it. So for new people in search and rescue, this gives a great introduction to what it's like to work different environments.
And if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.